have to come clean from the very beginning and say that this review of the movie Detroit might be a little bit jumbled, which I think is fair because the movie itself is a little bit jumbled. Detroit is probably the most emotionally heavy movie that I can remember seeing in years. It is also a pretty flawed movie. And it's also a pretty good movie, too. I know those things sound like they should be conflicting, and I really don't know how to explain it other than saying you probably couldn't fully understand without actually seeing the movie for yourself. So because of that, I'm going to do my best to avoid spoilers, but still give at least a decent bit of the rundown of what this movie was and what made it good, but also where it fell short. The movie starts with this animation of all things, which feels a little bit odd and out of place, but it basically details how a lot of urban city centers got hit hard economically, there weren't a lot of good paying jobs, and tensions eventually grew. We then transitioned into basically the beginnings of the riots in Detroit in the summer of 1967. I think the movie does a really good job in this opening scene of showing how kind of overreach of power and overreactions to certain things from both parties involved can lead to the beginning of a riot. You kind of see things from both angles to where you understand the tensions, but you also see that each side did things wrong. They did things that they should not have done, and it just leads to a situation spiraling out of control like a riot eventually does. So we get to see this whole situation evolve. We see the tension on both sides of everything. We see the police fearing for their lives a lot of the time, but also trying to maintain some sort of order in the city. We also see their vast overreach and abuse of power to further enrage people, and we see that perspective of why they would be enraged in those scenarios. I think they do a good job of showing that, and then the movie kind of takes a turn and you're not really sure where all of that went, and certainly not where it's going. And it's that kind of shift that sort of makes this movie jumbled. It kind of has the feel as if it had like 6 different writers who weren't really on the same page or working together to put this script all into one piece. It just kind of seems like somebody got this first 30 minutes and somebody got the next 20, you're gonna get the next 45 to an hour, and so on. It doesn't have that sense of cohesiveness to where the different scenes and the different situations flow together. So you feel a little bit lost at times as to where these people fit in and what exactly their struggle is and where the story surrounding them is actually going. But even despite that very major shortcoming, this movie still does a good job of putting you in the situations of these particular characters and sort of understanding their struggle within this whole event that is unfolding. And speaking of an unfolding event, the movie itself builds largely towards this one core scene that is pretty much at the heart of this movie and the heart of the third act, pretty much. That's the fallout of this main core scene. They do not do a good job of building up the tension to that core scene. You kind of realize as that scene drags on that this is the important part of the movie. This is sort of the big turning point in the movie, but they don't do a good job of building that. They also don't do that good a job in showing the fallout of that situation and building kind of the moment of what's going to come about of these characters and what's going to eventually happen to the antagonists involved. And even in that core scene, there's kind of a lot of filler. And that's why it feels so crazy to say that with all these shortcomings, it's still a very good movie. It still hit very hard emotionally. You feel for these characters, you hate the bad guys involved, and it just did a good job of pulling you in. I don't want to name names or give descriptions for people that are going into this movie blind like I was, but the main antagonist in this movie, I found myself hating more than any character that I can remember. He has a way of just getting under your skin and pissing you off with the things he does. It was fantastic what he did. I thought it was a great performance, and I thought all around there was a lot of very good performances in this movie. It just felt like some of the characters weren't given a chance to properly develop to where we cared about them enough, or at least as much as we should, and some other characters just kind of seemed out of place. I will name names in the sense that I was a little bit excited to see John Boyega in another major role, and he's good. He's definitely a terrific actor. His character was kind of meaningless. I'm not sure why he was there other than the fact that historically, I guess there was a similar guy there, and I apparently way back in the day, private security was much more respected than it is now. Again though, I really want to avoid any other in-depth descriptions of particular characters. I just will say that somehow this movie managed to grab me. It managed to hit very hard emotionally, to the point where I was sitting in my seat almost to the end of the credits, pretty much speechless, while my buddy and I at least tried to find the words to describe the impact of what we had just seen. It was very impactful, and I think it's a lot of things that are still relevant in today that you can start to see other people's perspectives from a lot of, just situations depicted in this movie. If there's one other major flaw, along with the pretty jumbled storytelling that felt like it was contributed by 6 different people, this movie could have shaved off probably a good half hour and just built up different moments a little bit better and been just fine. It is a long movie, and I didn't necessarily find myself thinking, will this get over with? But there were times where I was thinking, let's get on with it. I'm not really sure where this is going, and they tried going back to things that, related to certain characters that they sort of treated it in the end as if you should have cared about that situation a lot. They just never gave you enough earlier on to make you care about those particular things. Anyway, that is my thoughts on the movie Detroit. It did a handful of things absolutely marvelously, and a handful of other things that were at least moderate shortcomings. All in all, it manages to pull you in so heavily with the emotion and the historical context of these events that I think it's at least somewhat of an important film, but also, in my opinion, definitely a good one, if nothing else. If you have also seen Detroit and want to chat about in the comments, obviously feel free to do so. Would love to hear some other people's perspectives on what they thought of the movie. Make sure you like this video if you enjoyed it, because I always appreciate that. But above all else, everybody, thank you so much for watching.